I'm going to share with you how I sculpted this little dwarf maquette. You can see how I did the concept art and the turns in the short section of my channel. I did a quick thumbnail sketch to figure out the basic pose of the character. He's going to be adventuring through a dungeon holding a torch. I used some thin gauge armature wire to make the skeleton. I'll tell you now, I should have used a thicker gauge because the weight of the clay became very heavy for this armature. I figured out where the arms would go, and then I used some aluminum foil to fill in some of the empty area. Once the armature is completed, I added a thin layer of Sculpey clay, which I rake to give some texture. I'll then bake this in the oven, and I'll have a hard surface to sculpt on. While the maquette cooled, I decided to cut out a piece of aluminum tubing to make his little axe. I wrapped the tubing with a thin wire. I had baked a piece of Sculpey onto the head of the axe earlier, and then I wrapped a handle and sculpted the blade. I baked the axe and then moved on to sculpting the maquette. I sculpted and baked a small torch that I could then put into his hand for his dungeon exploration. After marking on where the helmet would be and his eyes, I baked him in the oven again. I am new to using clay and tried an experiment with it earlier that failed. I realized that clay is really good for sculpting thin pieces that you want to be able to flex, like the wings on his helmet. Clay is also really sticky, so I used cornstarch to keep it from sticking together. Once these smaller elements were sculpted, I baked them in the oven as well. I'm also trying this Sculpey adhesive. You apply some to your Sculpey, stick the piece on, and when they bake in the oven, again, they'll have a strong bond. I bake this maquette in several stages. This allows me to sculpt soft things onto hard surfaces, which is easier. I then attached the pre-baked clay wings to the helmet and baked him again. After he cooled, I crazy glued on the little armor pieces for his belt and then blended them in with the Sculpey belt. Then it was time to add that beard to his face. The Sculpey adhesive allows you to add pieces to your maquette without distorting them like I did with these eyebrows. And I use isopropyl alcohol to smooth out what I've sculpted. I then carved on a mouth and sculpted a hand holding the axe. In my children's book, the little dwarf gets an envelope to carry his items in, so I decided to sculpt the little backpack for the maquette. I sculpted this rolled up little blanket to keep him warm on his journey. Added the little straps and buckles. There were a lot of little details to add to this backpack, but it all helped in the storytelling. With the last details sculpted, he went into the oven for one more bake. I remembered hobbits having a little frying pan on their backpack, so I thought I'd add a little pot to the dwarf's backpack so he has something to cook in. It's very inspirational to take something that you've designed and to make it come alive in 3D. I'm excited to get to paint him, and I'll share that in the next video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit the like button, comment, share, and subscribe.